MTG Scoundrels. It's in the cardboard.
Ladies and gentlemen, scoundrels of all ages, welcome back to another episode of Modern Weekly. Today on the docket, we have Eldrazi Ramp and Affinity. Of course, Affinity just recently getting the upgrade of Mox Opal back into their list. Starting off with Misty Rainforest and Pass. Of course, Eldrazi Ramp has been making the rounds as one of the best decks in the format, no matter how poorly I play it. There is Spire of Industry into an Ornithopter, taking one off the Spire here for an Esper Sentinel. And passing the turn, we have a crack of a Misty Rainforest. One could argue finding the Hedge Maze, yes indeed. So we will have a Surveil shortly. There we are, there's the Surveil. Keeping it on top. Untapping, drawing. And there is the Uggin's Labyrinth with an emrakul underneath it. Into a Talisman of Impulse. Esper Sentinel triggers. We'll go ahead and draw a card. Into a Malevolent Rumble. Oh, you don't get two cards off of that, bud. We will address this after it triggers, I presume, in some form or another. Milling 4. That's what you want to see. K-Return getting into the bin. It's arguably one of your best ways to deal with Kappa Cannoneer. Taking the Sowing Mycospawn. And on turn 3, it's looking like 5 mana at least? Not a bad start. Alright. Dealing with the Esper Sentinel. So that was the card drawn. Looks like both players agreed on that here. Looks like shuffling it in. This may not be the best judge call ultimately here. Still working on having judges available on a more consistent basis. However, that was the card in fact drawn. I'm going to shuffle it in. Probably the other card should have been shuffled too. But we'll move forward from this. There's a Mishra's Bauble. This is a reminder, of course, for everyone to call for a judge in these situations. There is a tapped blue-white artifact land. Spire of Industry taking 1 damage here. For a Thoughtcast. Drawing 2 cards off the Thoughtcast, bringing us to 19 to 18. There's a Mishra's Bauble. And passing the turn. There's a Snow-Covered Waste into a kicked Sowing Mycospawn here. Going to exile the Indestructible land. of course that spawn being cracked, so that'll leave the battlefield here as well. Darksteel Citadel, land for turn. Into a Springleaf Drum. A lot of options. Taking one off of the Spire of Industry for a Thought Monitor. There's an Ornithopter. This is what Affinity does, quite a board of permanents. And passing the turn. Another Kicked Sowing Mycospawn. That'll exile the Darksteel Citadel. Though it was probably tempting to take one of the blue sources away, but that'll find another Eldrazi Temple. There are lines here where ultimately taking away their non-artifact lands is the correct thing to do if you draw into Karn. Which for the last few weeks, Karn has been a mainstay in Eldrazi Ramp as the format has evolved. There is a tap Stomping Ground and passing the turn. Cracking Mishra's Bauble. Speaking of Karn, right on top. This is where that would have paid off so well. There's an Urza Saga. I'll get the trigger and one counter here for the Saga. Saga really being one of the two cards you desperately need in hand when you're an Affinity player. It is your finisher along with Kappa Cannoneer. There's an Emery. That'll mill 3 here. There's a Kappa. And a Portable Hole, which the Portable Hole only has one target at the moment. Oh, excuse me, mill 4. 2 Kappas in the bin. Thought Monitor getting in for 2. That'll bring us to 17 to 16. And of course, taking 1 off of that Spire for the Emery. Untapping and drawing. I think the way you really blow this game out, I mean, Karn is an option here. But in a lot of ways, it's attack with your 2/3/3s. Make the Affinity player do something. And cast a 7-drop to trigger the K return in the bin. However, no 7-drop in hand, it looks like. So there is a world here where you kind of just go Karn, Maybe go get liquid metal coating. Also a spot where getting Karn and like Torpor Orb would do something pretty similar. Negating kappa triggers is pretty important. Because if you can't block kappa, that's hard enough. There's the Karn. So pretty much no mana available to be used here. But if you find the liquid metal coating, you can turn Emery into an artifact. Just looking at the Karn board here, it looks like. And we'll take this moment of looking at the sideboard to let you guys know. Go ahead and follow us on our socials, MTG Scoundrels, on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook. And like and subscribe to the channel. And if you happen to reach out to our sponsor, Grove Warden Games, definitely let them know you want a t-shirt. The more interest they have, the sooner we'll get something up on the website to be able to purchase those. Speaking of, there is liquid metal coating, as we were talking about earlier, out of the Karn board. So really you have two options here. You can either target the Emery, or you can target the Spire of Industry in the upkeep. Karn being one of the best ways to fight Mox Opal decks, as we've found out. So there's the pass. In the upkeep. Oh, going to go ahead and target the Spire of Industry. That'll mess with any colored mana here. Considering Karn already turns off the Springleaf Drum. This makes it a little bit harder. Emery targeting. Oh, no. Can't target. Well, you can target the kappa, but you can't cast it. Targeting a Mishra's Bauble, going to go ahead and cast the Mishra's Bauble. Of course, that Saga now on 2. Thought Monitor going to attack the Karn. And pass the turn. Ugin's Lab for turn. Attacking him for 6. Well, I mean, there's a world where you use liquid metal coating first here, but Emrakul the Promise End, triggering the K return. Taking 1. casting Metallic Rebuke to counter the emrakul, but the K return is going to deal 5 damage to each creature. And the cast trigger will still happen, so the Eldrazi Ramp player will still take the next turn. And looks like they're sorting out the Esper Sentinel trigger. Paying the 1. That'll wipe the board clean. And destroy the Urza Saga, making it a 0/0 creature. Double Metallic Rebuke in hand. Just showing the cards. There's the cranial plating. Nothing to cast here. Passing the turn. Tough spot. Another land needed to be drawn here. Untapping. Liquid metal coating. Making the land an artifact. Karn upticking to destroy it. And here's a Breaker of Creation off the top. Not so bad, if I do say so myself. Gaining 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 life here. And passing the turn. And scooping them up. Game 1, going to Eldrazi Ramp. Thank you all so much for watching us here at MTG Scoundrels. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend. Of course, we appreciate all of you tuning in. It's been a pretty special few months. And it's nice to have Modern back to a point where we can all enjoy it again. Or at least to a point where we're not 100% expecting the same best decks over and over again. I mean, there's definitely a certain few of them, between Eldrazi Ramp, Boros Energy, now Temur Breach as the 3 main best decks, but there's a lot of room for innovation still in this format. Now, for those of you that are going to RC Portland, SCGCon Portland, definitely look out for me on Saturday. I will be there playing some standard events, as much as I want to go there and play Modern. Unfortunately, with the breaking of part of my back, managed to fracture it back in November. Not currently in the shape to be able to play in the 10K or even in the standard 5K, so I'll be doing some side events on Saturday, checking out some artists. And of course, if you guys see me, feel free to say hello. I'll be handing out some stickers from the channel. So definitely stop by. And to go into our sponsors, definitely check out our friends over at Arcane Artistry. They make wonderful food, clue, and treasure tokens in the stained glass style. Of course, also check out our sponsor and host of our channel, Warden Games, link in the description below. They also have their TCG player there. Wonderful place to storm out. Check them out, Warden Games. And definitely check out the artist of our channel, Chandrar, email in the description. They are open to new projects. I know some MTG creators have reached out to them, so thank you for supporting a wonderful individual, Chandrar. Now, what we should expect to see out of the sideboard here. Honestly, Eldrazi Ramp probably only bringing in a couple extra K returns. Generally, they're playing 2 in the main and 2 in the board. And then a bunch of consigned memories. Wouldn't be surprised if it's just bringing in the K returns here and just sticking to the main plan. Affinity, of course, bringing in more Metallic Rebukes, possibly some consigned memories to deal with the big threats, as well as some of the triggered abilities of these colorless sources. Getting started. There's an artifact land into a Mishra's Bauble and pass. Tap Stomping Ground and pass here. Kind of a slow start initially. There's a Darksteel Citadel. Already 3 artifacts on the battlefield for the Affinity player. Tapping 2. There's a Thoughtcast. Drawing 2 cards here. And passing the turn. 2 mana, Talisman of Impulse, and passing. A little bit slow. There's the Mishra's Bauble. Normally the Eldrazi Ramp player wants to move a little bit faster than this. But it looked like I saw a card in hand there. Maybe just missing a 7-drop. The Affinity player already has 4 artifacts. There's a Spire of Industry. Taking 1, going to 20 to 19. Esper Sentinel. Into a Thought Monitor. Drawing 2. Into a Mox Opal. You get so used to Opal not being available in this format. There's an Eldrazi Temple. Enough for a Kick-Sowing Mycospawn, but I think here, yep, there's the Karn the Great Creator. Looks like trying to improvise. There's the Metallic Rebuke, but you have to tap that Mox Opal to get the blue mana. That'll counter the Karn. Deciding to leave the Thought Monitor up here, not that it really mattered. But the Improvise only works for the colorless part of the spell. There's another artifact land. Essentially safe from having to worry about Spire of Industry. Attacking him for 3. That'll bring us to 17 to 19. And there is an Emery Lurker of the Loch. It'll mill 4. Emery, of course, costing less because of the amount of artifacts out on the battlefield. Alright, there is a Kozilek's command. Targeting the Emry. Letting the card be drawn. There is an Otawara to bounce the Emry back to hand. Mox Opal being used for the colored mana there. Still getting 5 Eldrazi spawns. The Bauble going to look at the top of the Eldrazi Ramp player's deck. Untapping, drawing 1 for Bauble, and 1 for turn. There's another Bauble. Looks like requesting to look at the Kozilek's command. Kozilek's command, arguably the best card in Modern. In fact, a lot of people are trying to figure out ways to put it in decks that are not things like Affinity or Eldrazi. If you have colorless sources, kind of just worth playing it because it does so much. There is Kappa Cannoneer. Into a Mox Opal, which will put another counter on the Kappa. Kappa Cannoneer, Ward 4. When an artifact comes in, it gets a +1/+1 counter and can't be blocked. And there is another Emry, or the Emry that was put back to hand, excuse me. Oof, cranial plating getting into the bin there. Well, there is possibly 13 Eldrazi mana available here. Problem is, you kind of need to deal with that Kappa. And the Kappa is out of Kozilek's return flashback range. Not that it's flashback out of the graveyard, but you know, when you cast something 7 or greater, it does get cast out of the graveyard. If you so choose. If it's in there. Here is another K command. Using enough mana to shoot the Kappa while also paying the ward cost and paying the 1 for the Esper Sentinel. Which is wild. That's how strong these Kozilek's commands are. But now it's just a matter of that Emry is going to target that cranial plating. Bauble. Oh, there's a Devourer Destiny. Bauble not quite... Oh, excuse me, Devourer Destiny not quite what you need here. Because that cranial plating is going to move to whatever it needs to move to. Especially with a Mox Opal and a Spire of Industry. Could even do it at instant speed. There's a Memnite. Yeah, deciding probably to go after that cranial plating. Looks as though there's 2 lands in hand for the Eldrazi Ramp player. Emery, targeting the cranial plating. It's a lot of artifacts. And some flyers. Or at least one flyer. Oh, never mind. Casting another Thought Monitor to draw 2. There's a Mishra's Bauble. Ah, there's a cranial plating in hand. That'll do it. Attaching the plating onto the Thought Monitor. That can attack. And that should be 13 coming in. Yep, attacking with the 2 creatures it can. That'll be 13 damage if the Eldrazi Ramp player blocks the Esper Sentinel. And looks like we'll in fact block it, so that way they don't die. That'll bring us to 1-19. Alright, passing the turn. I saw there was a Breaker of Creation in hand, but I don't think that's going to be enough here. There's 8 mana. Only 11 life to gain. Okay, 12 life. Oh, wrong card. There's the Breaker of Creation. That'll gain a bunch of life here, but I don't think that's ultimately going to be enough. Bring us to 13-19. No flyers, nothing with reach. At least a World Breaker would help here, but that, unfortunately, is not the card. And even then, you can move the cranial plating at instant speed. There's a Darksteel Citadel. That'll add insult to injury. Emery is going to copy the cranial plating out of the bin. Or at least that would be my guess. Just to hopefully play around a open K command. And scooping it up. Game 2, going to Affinity. Thank you all so much for watching us here at MTG Scoundrels. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe. Be a friend, tell a friend. Once again, I will be at RC Portland. SCG Con Portland. Coming up this coming Saturday, February 8th. So definitely stop by if you see me. It'll look pretty similar to the channel art, luckily, so that'll make it easy. Come get a free sticker. Moving into Game 3 here, Eldrazi Ramp will in fact be on the play, which some may argue might be the strongest position to be in the modern format, and in most formats in Magic the Gathering at this point. However, there is an art to definitely pulling yourself out of the position of being on the draw and winning matches. Both players looking at their sevens coming up here. Affinity in an interesting spot. Honestly, probably in a worse spot thanks to Mox Opal being so strong in the Teamer Breach lists. But as an Affinity player, I think you have to play it, even with its price tag. Of course, if you don't play it, makes you a little bit less susceptible to artifact hate, but you are in fact Affinity. Both players looking like they're going to keep their hands here. And we'll get started with Game 3. Starting off with a Hedge Maze. Bidding an Emrakul the Promised End. Not something you always want to see as an opposing player staring down Eldrazi Ramp. There is a Spire of Industry into a Mishra's Bauble into an Ornithopter into another Ornithopter. And passing the turn. Wooded Foothills. Passing. Bauble taking a look at the top card of the opponent's deck. Drawing one for Bauble at the beginning of the turn. There's another artifact land. And of course, drawing for turn after drawing for Bauble. And passing. Wooded Foothills getting cracked. Going to 19, it looks like. Finding a tapped Stomping Ground. Of course, in this position, you kind of wished it was a commercial district. But you really want to avoid having too many tapped sources in your main deck as an Eldrazi Ramp player. You want as often as possible to be able to hit your Utopia Sprawls, hit your Talismans. Untapping and drawing here. Shifting Woodland into a Kozilek's Return. Essentially trying to wipe the board early, get rid of some of the artifacts on the board. Spire of Industry getting tapped. Rebuke going to counter that Kozilek's Return. But that does get it into the bin, which in a lot of ways is where it wants to be in the first place. There's an Esper Sentinel. Him passing the turn. Utopia Sprawl. Looking like that'll probably name green here. Into another Kozilek's Return. taking another damage off the Spire of Industry to cast another Metallic Rebuke to counter the Kozilek's Return. Of course, drawing a card off the Esper Sentinel. Untapping. And drawing. Another Spire of Industry. Tapping 3. Tapping 6. There is a Kappa Cannoneer. That'll get the counter. That's what you want if you're the Affinity player. Oh boy, there is the Null Drifter Evoke. This is probably one of the sweetest things you can do as an Eldrazi Ramp player. The Evoke technically is cast, and it's a 7-mana spell. That triggers the Kozilek's Return, and that will wipe the board. And you can still choose to keep one of them in the bin and not cast it. Drawing 2 off of the Null Drifter. There is a Forest and pass. That's one way to reset things. There's a Mishra's Bauble. Tapping 2 for Cranial Plating. There is a Karn the Great Creator. Which isn't the worst here by any stretch, but there is a mana open. There's the Consign to Memory. So the Karn will get countered and pass the turn. Memnite cast. And there is 3 for a Thought Monitor. Drawing 2 cards. And another artifact into play off the dual land there. Some Cranial Plating threatening to be played. Oh, what a top deck. Well then, sometimes you just top deck a Karn. We'll see what gets played here. Third Kozilek's Return. And passing. This is a tough spot. Sometimes the best way to deal with Affinity is just to get rid of all their creatures, so Cranial Plating has no effect. There's an Esper Sentinel. There's a Shadow Spear. And attaching the Shadow Spear to the Esper Sentinel, passing the turn. Esper Sentinel currently at 2/2. There is a Snow-Covered Waste into a Sowing Mycospawn. Exiling a Spire of Industry. Solid target after we saw that Karn in hand. Finding an Eldrazi Temple. Assuming that Sowing Mycospawn is going to be a chump blocker here moving forward. There's a Thoughtcast. Draw 2 cards. The Affinity deck just reloads their hands so well. Not quite as good without the One Ring, but still, 8 draw 2s at minimum. Add an Esper Sentinel and you have another way to draw cards through to Disruption. There's an Emery. There's a Springleaf Drum. Attaching the cranial plating onto the Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel getting in. Currently an 8/2. Blocking. That'll bring us to 14-26. And passing the turn. No mana available for the Affinity player. There is a Kozilek's Command. X equals 3. To exile the Emery. And there is a Karn the Great Creator. And going to tick up the Karn, passing the turn. And with that, scooping them up. Game 3, and the match going to Eldrazi Ramp. Thank you all so much for watching us here at MTG Scoundrels. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe. Follow us on our socials, and we will see you all next week.